It never begins with shouting, control, or chaos. It begins softly, almost beautifully. The story of a narcissistic husband doesn't start with a fight, it starts with a fantasy. He walks into your life like a calm storm, disguised as the man you've always wanted. He knows exactly what to say, how to look at you, and how to make you feel like the most extraordinary woman in the room. Every word feels intentional, every compliment feels personal, and every gesture feels sincere. You start to believe you've found someone who truly understands you, someone who finally sees you in ways no one ever has. That's how it begins, not in darkness, but in light. He studies you carefully, like an artist learning his subject. He listens when you talk about your dreams, your insecurities, your fears. You think it's emotional connection, but for him, it's information, ammunition he'll use later to keep you close. He'll remember what hurts you and what heals you, but not because he cares. It's because he wants control over both. The beginning feels like love, but it's really a setup. He doesn't love you for who you are. He loves the way you make him feel about himself. You become the mirror that reflects his greatness back to him. At first, you don't see it. How could you? The attention feels intoxicating. He texts you constantly, calls you just to hear your voice, praises you in front of others, and you think, finally, someone who wants me as much as I want them. You confuse intensity for intimacy. You mistake obsession for passion. And before you know it, his presence becomes your comfort zone. You start to crave it, depend on it. The same attention that made you feel special slowly becomes the leash he'll use to keep you close. Then something shifts. It's small, almost invisible at first. Maybe he criticizes a small thing you said. Maybe he mocks you in a playful way that doesn't feel so playful. Maybe he goes silent for a day without explanation, just to watch you wonder what you did wrong. You try to brush it off. Everyone has bad days, you tell yourself. But deep down, something feels off. You start adjusting yourself, trimming your personality just to keep the peace, because losing that feeling of approval terrifies you more than anything. The narcissistic husband knows this pattern well. He creates a rhythm of closeness and withdrawal that keeps you emotionally addicted. When he pulls away, you chase him. When he comes back, you feel relief. And that relief is what traps you. You start believing that if you just do better, if you love him more, if you stay quiet when he's angry, if you avoid saying the wrong thing, you'll get that version of him back again. The version who adored you, the version who made you feel seen. He rewards your compliance with affection and punishes your resistance with silence or anger. He learns how far he can go before you break, and he stays just within that limit. Every apology feels sincere, every kiss feels like a reset, but it's all part of the same game. He builds you up only to tear you down, not out of hate, but out of habit. It's the only way he knows how to feel powerful, by keeping someone else small. And as the relationship deepens, so does the confusion. You start questioning your own perceptions. You tell yourself he didn't mean it, that he's just stressed, that he loves you but doesn't know how to show it. You defend him to your friends, you excuse him to your family, and you start lying to yourself just to keep the illusion alive. Because the truth that the man you love might be emotionally dangerous is too painful to face. This is how the subtle beginning traps you. Not with obvious cruelty, but with emotional dependency. You don't notice the chains because they feel like arms around you. You don't hear the manipulation because it sounds like love. It's a slow unraveling, a quiet shift from affection to control. One day you're his everything, and the next you're wondering what you did wrong. But by then, the pattern is already set, and the man you thought you knew has slowly turned into someone else entirely, someone you don't recognize anymore, yet can't seem to walk away from. Control doesn't always come with shouting. It often comes in whispers. A narcissistic husband doesn't need to raise his voice to dominate. He just needs to make you question your own mind. The most dangerous weapon he uses isn't anger, it's confusion. And the game begins the moment he realizes he can twist your reality without you noticing. It starts with small moments, tiny inconsistencies that feel harmless. You remember him saying something, but when you bring it up, he swears he never did. You recall an argument clearly, every word, every tone, but he insists you're imagining it. That's not how it happened, he'll say with calm confidence. And when you try to defend your memory, he laughs or sighs as if you're being dramatic. That's how he plants the first seed of doubt. You start to wonder if you misheard, if you misunderstood, if maybe you really do overreact sometimes. He's not arguing to prove you wrong. He's arguing to make you uncertain. Then comes the shift in tone. One day he's affectionate, the next he's cold. You never know what version of him you're going to get. The inconsistency becomes your new normal, and that's exactly what he wants. Because uncertainty keeps you on edge, and when you're on edge, you're easier to control. You start walking on eggshells, overanalyzing every word, every glance, every silence. You begin to adjust your tone before speaking, making sure your words won't set him off. Without realizing it, you start molding yourself around his moods. He plays with emotions like a puppeteer. He'll withdraw affection when he wants power, and he'll give it back when he senses you slipping away. One moment he's silent, distant, unavailable, and you start chasing him, apologizing for things you didn't do, begging to make things right. Then, just when you're emotionally drained, he softens, smiles, and says, "See, I knew you still loved me," and you feel relief. That relief is not love, it's control disguised as peace. It's how he trains you to associate your calm with his approval. Gaslighting becomes his most effective tool. He uses it like an artist uses color, carefully, subtly, perfectly blended. When you confront him about his hurtful behavior, he tells you you're too sensitive. When you try to express your pain, he says, "You always twist everything." And after enough repetition, you start to believe him. You start apologizing for your own feelings, questioning your sanity, and second-guessing every emotional reaction you have. The goal is simple. If he can make you doubt your reality, he can control your reality. He knows how to turn your empathy against you. When you call him out, he plays the victim. He tells stories about his difficult childhood, his stress at work, how no one understands him like you do. Suddenly, you're comforting the same man who just hurt you. You're wiping tears from the face of the person who made you cry. And he watches quietly as you twist yourself into guilt and compassion. He doesn't need to apologize. He just needs you to feel sorry enough to forgive him again. Slowly, confusion becomes your emotional home. You wake up wondering what mood he'll be in, wondering what version of yourself you need to be that day to keep him calm. You stop trusting your instincts because every time you tried, he told you were wrong. And somewhere deep down, you start believing that maybe you are, that maybe you're too emotional, too sensitive, too much. That's how he wins, not by being louder, but by making you smaller. And the worst part, from the outside, he still looks like the perfect husband. To others, he's charming, kind, even humble. He knows when to smile, when to act gentle, when to play the role of the loving partner. So when you try to explain what's happening, no one believes you. They tell you he seems like such a good man, and you start doubting yourself even more. That's when the confusion turns into isolation, because now you don't just question him, you question your entire perception of love, of truth of yourself. This is control through confusion. It's not loud or obvious, it's psychological warfare played in silence. It's not about making you hate him, it's about making you doubt you. Because when your confidence cracks, when your sense of self becomes blurry, he doesn't need to control your body anymore. He already controls your mind. The power dynamic, control disguised as care, it often sounds like love. That's what makes it so deceptive. A narcissistic husband doesn't begin with commands, he begins with concern. He doesn't say, "Do what I say," he says, "I'm just trying to help you." His control doesn't come wrapped in anger, it comes wrapped in protection. He convinces you that his dominance is love, that his jealousy is devotion, and that his criticism is honesty. What looks like care is really control, but by the time you notice, it's already too late. It starts with little things. He asks where you're going not because he doesn't trust you, but because he worries about your safety. He wants to know who you're texting, not because he's suspicious, but because he cares who's in your life. He criticizes your clothes, your friends, your choices, always softly, always with a reason that sounds noble. "I just think you deserve better. I just don't want people to take advantage of you. I just want what's best for you." He uses the language of care to plant the seeds of control. At first, it even feels comforting. You mistake his possessiveness for passion, his monitoring for love. You tell yourself, he just loves me too much. You think it's romantic that he notices everything, that he wants to be involved in every decision. But slowly, his care starts to limit your choices. You stop talking to certain friends because it upsets him. You stop wearing what you like because he says it makes him uncomfortable. You start asking for his opinion on everything, not out of respect, but out of fear of disapproval. He builds the illusion that he's protecting you, when in reality, he's isolating you. Every restriction is disguised as affection. "I don't want you to get hurt. You can't trust people the way I do. I'm the only one who really understands you." That's how he traps you, by convincing you that the world outside is dangerous and he's the only safe place you have. But that safety isn't love, it's confinement. You stop realizing how much space you've lost until you look around and see that he's standing in every corner of your life. Then comes the justification phase. When you question him, he doesn't get angry right away, he gets disappointed. He tells you you're ungrateful, that you don't appreciate how much he does for you. And somehow, you end up apologizing again, not because you're wrong, but because you don't want to lose his approval. You become dependent on his validation, always trying to earn his affection back. He's not just controlling what you do, he's controlling how you feel about yourself. And the manipulation doesn't stop there. When you finally gather the courage to express your discomfort, he flips the script. He says, "You're misinterpreting everything, that you're making him the bad guy." He'll tell you, "You always think the worst of me." He'll act wounded, distant, and silent, and that silence cuts deeper than words ever could. You try to make it right, desperate to fix what you think you broke, not realizing that this is exactly how he keeps you trapped. He turns every confrontation into a guilt trip, every question into a betrayal. The power dynamic becomes invisible because it hides behind love. It's not about him yelling, it's about him convincing you that you need him. You start depending on him for emotional stability, approval, and direction. Your self-esteem becomes tied to his mood. When he's happy, you feel safe. When he's distant, you feel like you're falling apart. That dependency is his control. He doesn't need chains or threats. He only needs your need for his love. Over time, his control becomes the foundation of the relationship. You begin to feel like you can't make decisions without checking with him first. You second guess your instincts, your emotions, your independence. And even when something inside you screams that this isn't right, you silence it. Because you've been taught that questioning him means you don't love him enough. That's how he disguises power as protection. He convinces you that obedience is partnership, that silence is respect, that sacrifice is love. And when you finally realize that every act of care came with conditions, that every "I love you" was followed by a rule, you start to see the pattern. You weren't being protected, you were being managed. You weren't being loved, you were being owned. And it all started with the softest words, the sweetest promises, and the quietest kind of control. It's not always the shouting or the insults that destroy you. Sometimes it's the kindness that comes after them. That's what makes a narcissistic relationship so powerful. It's not constant pain, it's the unpredictable mix of pain and affection. The narcissistic husband masters this pattern perfectly. He knows exactly when to pull you close and when to push you away. He doesn't just want control, he wants to keep you addicted to him. And he does that through the cycle of devaluation and reward, a never-ending emotional loop that keeps you holding on to a version of him that doesn't really exist. It always starts right after the charm fades. The man who once told you that you were the best thing that ever happened to him suddenly starts finding faults in everything you do. Your laugh is too loud, your opinions are wrong, your emotions are too much. He picks apart the very things he once said he loved about you. But he never does it all at once. It's slow, steady, calculated. He'll make little comments that seem harmless, almost playful, but over time they start cutting deeper. You start feeling smaller, less confident, less sure of yourself. That's the devaluation. He breaks you down quietly so you don't notice how much of yourself you're losing. And then, just when you're about to break, he brings the warmth back. Suddenly, he's kind again. He apologizes, maybe even cries. He promises he didn't mean it, that he's just stressed, that he loves you more than anything. He might surprise you with dinner, compliment you in front of others, or hold you close like he used to. And in that moment, you feel relief. That relief feels like love, but it's not. It's a chemical rush. Your body reacting to the emotional roller coaster he created. The pain made the affection feel more powerful. That's the reward. And it's what keeps you hooked. This pattern conditions you the same way a gambler gets addicted to the game. You start chasing that high of approval, that brief glimpse of the man you fell in love with. You tell yourself that if you just try harder, if you just stay patient, if you love him enough, that version of him will stay for good. But it never does. He gives you enough hope to keep you close and enough pain to keep you weak. That's how he maintains control. By turning love into a prize you have to keep earning, the devaluation moments become more frequent over time. He criticizes you more openly now, maybe even in front of others. He compares you to other women, questions your intelligence, mocks your emotions. You start shrinking yourself just to survive. You stop expressing your feelings because you know it'll only be used against you. And when he sees your silence, he calls it proof that you've changed, that you're no longer the woman he fell for. Somehow, even your pain becomes your fault. And yet, after every emotional storm, he always finds a way to play the hero again. He'll say, "See, we just needed to communicate better." He'll tell you, "You know I love you, right?" And for a moment, you'll believe it, because that's what the cycle does. It makes you crave the very person who's causing your pain. You start confusing chaos with connection. You start thinking that the intensity of the relationship means it's real. You don't see it as manipulation, you see it as passion. He keeps you in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. You never know when the next outburst will come, when the next kind gesture will appear. You're always guessing, always trying to predict his mood, always trying to stay one step ahead to avoid conflict. That constant anxiety becomes your normal. And he knows that as long as you're emotionally exhausted, you won't have the strength to walk away. When he senses that you're slipping, he changes again. Suddenly, he's attentive, affectionate, almost perfect. You start thinking maybe things are getting better. Maybe he really is changing this time. But the truth is he's not changing. He's resetting. He's pulling you back into the loop, reminding you of the good moments just enough to erase the bad ones in your mind. And that's what makes this cycle so powerful. It blurs the line between love and manipulation until you can't tell the difference anymore. You stop trusting your instincts. You start believing that maybe this is what real love looks like: messy, painful, unpredictable. You convince yourself that every couple fights, every relationship has ups and downs. You minimize your pain because he always gives you just enough affection to keep hope alive. That's how he wins, by making you addicted not to him, but to the hope of him. The hope that the man who once adored you will come back. The hope that if you can just be better, he'll finally see your worth again. The hope that this time, the love will last. There's always a moment, quiet, small, but powerful, when something inside her finally begins to shift. It doesn't happen after the loudest fight or the cruelest insult. It happens in stillness, when the noise fades and she finally hears her own thoughts again. That's when the fog begins to lift. That's when the wife of a narcissistic husband starts to see what she's been living through. Not because he confessed it, not because anyone told her, but because her spirit has grown too tired of pretending it's love. At first, the realization feels like guilt. She starts noticing patterns she used to ignore, the constant apologies she gives without knowing what she did wrong, the way she braces herself before speaking, the way she studies his expressions like she's walking through a minefield. She notices how her laughter has become quieter, her confidence smaller, her world narrower. She realizes she's been shrinking to fit inside his comfort zone. And when that truth hits her, it doesn't feel like anger at first, it feels like grief. She grieves the version of herself she lost trying to keep him happy. This awakening doesn't happen overnight. It comes in flashes, tiny moments of clarity between waves of confusion. Maybe she sees how kind she is to everyone but herself. Maybe she hears her own voice tremble when she says, "I'm fine," even though she's not. Maybe a friend asks if she's okay, and for the first time, she doesn't know how to answer. Those moments are small, but they're cracks in the wall he built around her. And once light starts slipping through those cracks, it only grows stronger. Then comes the shift in emotion. The things that used to scare her start to lose their power. His silent treatments no longer paralyze her. His criticism starts to sound predictable. She begins to notice the repetition, the same arguments, the same manipulation, the same apologies that mean nothing. She starts to see the pattern, and once she sees it, it stops controlling her in the same way. She starts to think, maybe it's not me. That single thought becomes the foundation of everything that follows. But awareness alone doesn't bring freedom, it brings conflict. Because now she's torn between what she knows and what she's afraid to lose. She still loves him, or at least the version of him she thought was real. She still wants to believe he'll change. And that's what makes this stage so painful. She's fighting a war between her heart and her reality. One part of her still craves his approval, while the other part is quietly learning to live without it. He notices the shift too. He can sense the difference in her silence, the calm in her voice, the way she no longer reacts to every provocation that scares him. Narcissists feed off emotional responses, and when she stops giving him that reaction, he feels his control slipping. So he'll try harder, suddenly acting tender, revisiting old memories, telling her he can't live without her. But this time, something inside her doesn't melt the way it used to. The same words that once made her weak now sound rehearsed, almost empty. She's beginning to see the script behind the performance. The turning point is not just realization, it's detachment. She starts observing him instead of reacting to him. She watches his manipulation from a distance. Like someone watching a movie she's already seen too many times. She can predict his next move, his next excuse, his next apology. That predictability kills the illusion. She starts recognizing that his love was never about connection, it was about control. And the more she sees that truth, the less power he has over her emotions. For the first time, she starts thinking about herself again. She remembers the woman she used to be, the one who laughed without fear, who had opinions, who felt alive. She starts reclaiming little pieces of that woman quietly, carefully, without telling him. She spends more time alone, more time in silence, more time listening to her own heart instead of his voice. Each small act of independence, saying no, taking a breath before apologizing, keeping her distance, becomes a rebellion he can't quite name. And that's when she begins to feel something she hasn't felt in a long time: peace. It's fragile at first, almost unfamiliar, but it's there. She realizes peace doesn't mean everything is fixed. It means she's no longer willing to be broken. She starts seeing herself not as the problem, but as the person who deserves better. She doesn't need him to confirm her worth anymore, because she's beginning to recognize it herself. And that quiet realization that she no longer needs his validation to exist becomes the most powerful turning point of all. Healing after being with a narcissistic husband isn't like flipping a switch, it's more like learning to breathe again after years of holding your breath. It begins in the smallest ways, sometimes without her even realizing it. She starts sleeping better, not because everything is okay, but because she's no longer walking on eggshells. Her nervous system is learning what safety feels like again. The constant tension that lived in her shoulders, the anxiety that sat in her chest, it begins to loosen its grip. She's not free yet, but she's finally beginning to feel the air of her own freedom. The first phase of healing feels confusing. There's guilt, there's sadness, and strangely enough, there's also loneliness. Because when you've spent years being told who you are, silence feels uncomfortable. She misses the noise she once hated, the arguments, the manipulation, even the control, because at least it was familiar. Now it's just quiet, and in that quiet, she's left alone with her own voice, a voice she hasn't heard clearly in years. That's where the rebuilding begins. Healing is not just about leaving him, it's about leaving the version of herself that believed she wasn't enough. The one who apologized for existing, who begged for love, who accepted disrespect in the name of keeping peace. She starts talking back to those thoughts. When her mind says, "You're overreacting," she answers, "No, I'm healing." When it says, "You'll never find love again," she whispers, "Maybe I'll find myself first." That's the shift. She's learning to give herself the compassion she kept trying to earn from him. There are moments where she'll doubt everything. Healing doesn't move in straight lines. Some days she feels strong and others she feels broken again. A song, a memory, a smell, it can all bring her back to those moments when she felt powerless. But this time something is different. She doesn't stay there. She feels the pain, but she doesn't drown in it. She starts to understand that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about taking the power away from it. What once defined her now becomes something she survived. Then comes self-forgiveness. The hardest part. She forgives herself for staying, for believing, for making excuses, for trying to fix someone who never wanted to change. She realizes she wasn't weak, she was loyal. She wasn't blind, she was hopeful. Her empathy was never the problem. It was his weapon. But now she's learning how to protect that empathy instead of giving it away to people who only take. That's when her self-worth starts to rebuild itself quietly and steadily. As she grows stronger, her world begins to expand again. She starts reconnecting with friends, hobbies, dreams she put aside because they didn't fit into his world. Maybe she signs up for a class, starts reading again, or simply enjoys a cup of coffee without anxiety. Those small acts become her declaration of independence. Each time she chooses peace over chaos, she's rewriting the story he tried to write for her. She's realizing that her life doesn't have to revolve around someone else's validation anymore. It can revolve around her own growth. And then something beautiful happens. She starts feeling joy again, not the kind that comes from external approval, but the quiet, grounding kind that comes from being at peace with yourself. She laughs without fear of judgment. She walks without waiting for permission. She speaks her truth, even if her voice shakes. That's real healing. Not pretending the pain never existed, but allowing it to transform her into someone wiser, stronger, and more self-assured. People might look at her and say she seems different. They might call her colder or more distant. But she knows she's not colder, she's clearer. She's learned boundaries. She's learned that love without respect is manipulation dressed as affection. She's learned that silence can be powerful when it's chosen, not forced. She no longer explains her worth. She no longer negotiates for love. She's finally learned that peace is not something someone gives you, it's something you claim for yourself. And while healing doesn't erase the past, it reshapes it. The scars remain, but they no longer ache. They remind her of what she overcame. The same woman who once questioned her strength now knows exactly how powerful she is. She survived emotional warfare and found herself again in the ruins. She learned that self-love isn't selfish, it's survival. And though she may still be healing, she's no longer trapped. She's walking forward one step at a time, toward a version of herself that was always there, just waiting to be seen again. When a woman finally walks away from a narcissistic husband, she isn't just leaving a man, she's leaving a version of herself that lived in fear, in doubt, in silence. Every tear, every argument, every apology she gave for peace was never wasted. It became the groundwork for the woman she's becoming now, stronger, clearer, and more awake than she's ever been. Because surviving someone who made you question your worth doesn't make you broken, it makes you brave. She's learned that love should never feel like punishment. That peace should not be earned through pain. That being loved isn't about being controlled or criticized. It's about being seen, supported, and safe. And when she finally understands that, she stops chasing the illusion of love he kept feeding her and starts choosing herself, even if it means standing alone. Because standing alone in truth will always be better than being held in a lie. She understands now that healing isn't about forgetting what he did. It's about remembering who she is. It's about reclaiming her laughter, her freedom, her voice. It's about realizing that the power he had over her was borrowed, and she just took it back. She no longer reacts to his words, his silence, or his absence. She doesn't need closure from him because she's already created it within herself. And maybe the most powerful part of her story is this: she no longer sees herself as a victim. She sees herself as the woman who walked through emotional fire and didn't lose her softness. She still believes in love, but now she knows what love isn't. She knows that real love will never make her question her worth. It will never dim her light to make someone else comfortable. It will never silence her voice just to protect someone's ego. So when she finally looks back, she doesn't see the pain anymore. She sees the lesson. She sees how every moment of suffering shaped her strength, how every manipulation sharpened her awareness, how every broken promise taught her to trust herself again. She realizes that she didn't lose herself in that relationship. She just buried herself under survival, and now she's finally free to rise. And that's the truth Jefferson Fisher wants every listener to take away. That healing from a narcissistic partner isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your freedom. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you are more than what they tried to make you believe. Because at the end of the day, the greatest victory isn't walking away from them. It's walking back home to yourself.